Today, we continue our journey into the originals. In the previous episode, Klaus and Rebecca faced the return of the powerful Dark Witch, Papa Tund, whose deadly rituals threaten New Orleans. Meanwhile, Klaus discovered Rebecca and Marcel's betrayal from a century ago. Reigniting old wounds, Elijah was forced to confront an impossible choice in order to save his family. The story continues. In the elegant silence of the opera house, Michael sat behind Klaus, pressing a white ash stake, the one that could kill the originals, against his back. The familiar feeling of dread swept over him.
Father? Still clinging to that word after all these years?
A bastard, desperate for a daddy.
With just a few words, Klaus's illusions of paternal love were completely shattered. Michael cruelly outlined his plan to destroy Klaus. Not only did he intend to kill Klaus, but he also planned to make the entire city forget he ever existed. As if he had never been there, the stage curtain slowly rose, revealing the silent play directed by Michael. Marcel became Michael's first captive, and he charmed the audience into thinking it was a comedy, making them applaud wildly. Klaus tried to rescue his foster son but was flung aside by Michael. Rebecca also rushed forward to save Marcel, but her enraged father grabbed the stake and drove it into his daughter's abdomen. Michael seized Marcel and bit into him. Elijah hurriedly arrived, and he and his siblings fled in a panic. Meanwhile, Michael picked up a nearby kerosene lamp. The raging fire quickly engulfed the opera house. Watching the flames soar, the original siblings believed Marcel was already dead. Elijah urged his siblings to flee while he stayed behind to hold Michael off. Once again, Klaus was defeated by his father. As the story concluded, Klaus's wounds had nearly healed. He said he wouldn't terrorize them for 1,000 years like Michael had. He toppled the statue beside him, revealing the white ash stake hidden inside. He stated that he would bring an end to Rebecca and Marcel, then sped away. Rebecca and Marcel did not hurry to flee New Orleans. Instead, they sought out Thierry for help. As long as they killed the three witches, led by Celeste, they could revive Davina. Without Davina's help, they wouldn't succeed in evading Klaus's pursuit. Thierry met with the two witches as promised, but Celeste did not appear. Thierry informed Bastiana and Genevieve of Rebecca and Marcel's intentions. Thierry was the first to bare his fangs at the witches, but they quickly retaliated. Marcel swiftly appeared and tore off Bastiana's head, but Genevieve seized the opportunity to subdue Rebecca and swiftly escaped. Haley, along with the werewolves, captured Celeste and threatened her into concocting a potion to break the curse. Elijah also found Monique and told her that Celeste was using the witch coven to settle her personal vendetta. Celeste wouldn't return the power she gained to the earth. She would only continue to survive by hopping from one body to another. Monique didn't believe him. Elijah presented his mother's spell, suggesting she could verify it herself. Celeste quickly prepared the potion, but the werewolves couldn't determine if it was genuine. Elijah arrived just in time, snatched the potion, and sped away with Celeste. He, too, doubted the potion's authenticity, but Celeste claimed she had no reason to deceive him. If Elijah destroyed the potion, Haley would hate him for the rest of her life. Yet, if he handed the potion to Haley, she would return to her pack and leave him behind. That was the greatest punishment Celeste could give Elijah. After much deliberation, Elijah chose to give the potion to Haley. Haley happily accepted the potion, embraced Elijah, and then left with the werewolves. Elijah turned to face his former lover, asking Celeste what her real, hidden agenda was in orchestrating all of this. Celeste replied that the real show was just beginning. Marcel and Rebecca would undoubtedly risk retrieving Davina's body, and Klaus surely knew this too. They would meet at the witch's tomb. No matter how hard Elijah tried, the family he loved would be torn apart tonight. This was her final act of revenge. In the dark and eerie witch's cemetery, Celeste quietly stepped back and trapped Elijah inside with an invisible barrier. The originals could enter, but they couldn't leave. Marcel and Rebecca found Davina's body and planned to take her out of the cemetery, but Rebecca was bound to the cemetery by a spell. Celeste tried to kill this body to possess a new host, repeating her old trick, but she didn't know that Monique was fully prepared. She awoke in her own body, and Elijah didn't show any mercy. He ended his former lover's life with his own hands. At the same time, Davina suddenly awoke. Klaus appeared in the cemetery, holding the white ash stake. In this temporary prison created by witchcraft, with a white ash stake and a curved dagger, the original siblings were destined to end their century-old feud. At Elijah's insistent request, Rebecca quickly fled from Klaus's sight. He would never allow Klaus, in his rage, to harm their sister. The two brothers stood locked in a standoff, From dusk till dawn, Marcel pinned his hopes on Davina, wishing she could break the barrier spell around the witch's cemetery, but the newly resurrected Davina was silent and looked deeply troubled. Elijah continued trying to reason with Klaus, pointing out that he was now just like Michael, but Klaus remained obsessed with the betrayal he had suffered. Klaus was convinced that Rebecca hadn't summoned Michael just to drive him out of New Orleans, but to take his life. Rebecca finally couldn't hold back any longer and appeared before Klaus. She told him that he always focused on others' faults but never saw the evil in his own actions, and so began a trial concerning Rebecca. Rebecca defended herself, saying it was because Klaus had prevented her from pursuing love and freedom. Klaus, however, argued that his sister's taste in men was too reckless for anyone's comfort. Rebecca retorted, "Is the son you raised not good enough?"
Do not mention his name.
Her older brother had once carved a wooden knight for her on a stormy night. To protect her brother, she had once raised a sword against their father. Klaus then placed all the blame on Marcel, demanding that Rebecca admit she was seduced by Marcel's ill intentions, but Rebecca refused to acknowledge this, stating that if given the chance, she would make the same choice again. This statement immediately enraged Klaus. The three siblings instantly clashed. Elijah seized the white ash stake, and Rebecca hurriedly escaped. Marcel brings in Camille to do some work on Davina's mind. Under Camille's care, Davina finally opened up about her ordeal. Her actions in helping Marcel fight against the witch coven had been met with severe condemnation from the ancestral witches. They warned her that if she abused her magic again, she would face harsh punishment. Seeing that Davina was unable to help, Marcel had no choice but to seek out Genevieve, but Genevieve said she could help only if Marcel agreed to return Davina to her. Marcel was caught in a dilemma. In an effort to persuade Klaus to change his mind, Elijah brought up old memories to free Klaus from their father's clutches. A young Rebecca had once raised a dagger in the dead of night, willing to bear the eternal guilt of patricide. It was Elijah who stopped her. Perhaps Rebecca made the wrong choice, but her love for Klaus was undeniable. Klaus was unmoved by this, instead urging Elijah to just use the white ash stake to kill him, as he had always been the unwanted bastard child. Elijah, however, was not swayed and threw the white ash stake aside, but Klaus, catching him off guard, suddenly plunged the curved dagger into his brother's abdomen, slowly driving the blade into his body. Elijah fell to the ground, screaming in pain, while Rebecca seized the opportunity to pick up the white ash stake and face Klaus. Klaus taunted her, threatening to kill her with his own hands, but Rebecca couldn't bring herself to strike him. Klaus was convinced that Rebecca's true intention in summoning Michael was to kill him, and he relentlessly forced her to admit this. Under his intense pressure, Rebecca finally confessed to the false accusation. Klaus was instantly heartbroken. He then took the white ash stake and drove it into his sister's body. Rebecca collapsed to the ground, disbelief in her eyes. Klaus, however, was left feeling even more desolate. The victorious king silently fiddled with the white ash stake, ultimately avoiding his sister's heart. Rebecca emerges unharmed in front of her brother. After his moment of rage, Klaus realized that he still loved his siblings and understood the immense pain his obsessive nature had caused Rebecca. He understood why Rebecca did what she did, but he still couldn't fully forgive her. Their brutal father had harmed each of his children. Klaus was obsessive and angry. Rebecca longed for love. Elijah had lost himself in his efforts to restore their family.
We are the definition of cursed. Always and forever.
Marcel ultimately decided to accept Genevieve's deal. He would return Davina to the witches, and in exchange, Genevieve would cast a spell to lift the cemetery's barrier. Klaus approached Elijah and pulled out the curved dagger with his bare hands, marking the end of his vengeance against his brother. A gentle breeze swept through the cemetery gates, stirring up fallen leaves. As the spell lost its power, Klaus also made his final judgment, granting his sister her freedom. Elijah would stay in New Orleans with him to raise the next generation of their family, but Rebecca would no longer be allowed to set foot in New Orleans. Rebecca accepts the offer and leaves in silence. Elijah arrived late to bid farewell to his beloved little sister. Rebecca, however, remarked that through this ordeal, she seemed to see a glimmer of humanity still shining deep within Klaus's heart. She gently kissed her brother's cheek before turning to leave. Rebecca found Marcel but did not ask him to leave with her, knowing he could never abandon this city. Rebecca even sought out Haley, reminding her not to forget to tell her unborn niece how much her aunt loved her. Thus, Rebecca's journey in New Orleans came to an end. Despite the sadness of parting, she still felt the fragrance of freedom on her journey into the distance. Klaus returned to the mansion, lost and disheartened. Marcel had already gathered a large group of vampires, ready to make a last stand, but Klaus merely glanced at him indifferently, said nothing, and headed upstairs. Elijah quickly appeared and flung Marcel aside, declaring that Marcel would be exiled from the French quarter and that he would succeed Klaus as the next ruler of New Orleans. A new power structure was thus established. On the full moon night, Jackson poured the antidote Celeste had prepared into an iron pot, and the werewolves shared it quietly, waiting for the effects to take hold. As the moonlit night was about to end, the werewolves finally broke the curse that had bound them for a century. Meanwhile, in the French quarter, vampires and witches were busy dividing up the territory. Thanks to Elijah's mediation, the factions gathered to discuss the issue of territorial claims. Oliver quickly relayed this information to Haley. Haley, furious, confronted Elijah, demanding to know why the werewolves were excluded from the territory-sharing ceremony. They had a heated argument, and Haley stormed off in anger. The first round of negotiations ended in failure. Life among the witches was far from happy for Davina. She was still afraid to use her magic, and she was constantly targeted by Monique. Her only joy came from sitting and chatting with Josh. Even though Josh couldn't help her with her troubles, Marcel was watching Davina from the shadows, and he contacted Thierry in an attempt to restore his rule, but Thierry refused, saying that the Originals brothers had already won this battle, and 2 vampires alone couldn't create a wave. Klaus seemed to have lost his will to fight. His days were spent either painting or discussing the mysteries of human origins with Genevieve, but he still offered his struggling brother a piece of advice: to first use incentives to ease the hostility between the factions. Elijah took his advice and quickly organized a grand party, inviting all the supernatural factions to attend. Genevieve made a high-profile appearance with 3 harvest witches in tow. The werewolves' presence immediately sparked hostility among the vampires. A human woman approached Elijah, pointing out that Father Kieran was no longer fit to lead the humans and that she was the best candidate to succeed him. Elijah accepted the political shift within the human faction, but amid the seemingly peaceful and lively atmosphere, Jackson quietly made his way upstairs. Klaus soon left the party as well, secretly meeting with the werewolves, seemingly plotting something underhanded. Jackson assumed that Klaus intended to create another hybrid army and firmly rejected the proposal, stating that the werewolves would never accept the vampire's filthy bloodline. Surprisingly, Klaus didn't get angry. He valued the werewolves' unity, seeing it as the strongest force to protect his child. However, the werewolves had been exiled from the French quarter for too long. Klaus wouldn't let his daughter grow up in the swamps, so he decided to help the werewolves grow stronger. Klaus presented a ring, saying it was a gift from his mother to his werewolf father. With this ring, the werewolves wouldn't be forced to transform. Jackson immediately accepted the deal. At the lively and peaceful party, tensions flared when a disagreement between the werewolves and vampires quickly escalated. Diego grabs Oliver and throws him out, and the two immediately tussle. Elijah was the first to grab Oliver and slam him onto the table, while the protective Jackson immediately held a wooden stake to Diego. The false peace was shattered in an instant. Klaus was thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. Haley, exasperated by their hair-trigger tempers, couldn't help but sarcastically suggest that they might as well kill everyone, since no one at the party had clean hands anyway. Elijah and Jackson then stop. A symbolic peace agreement was quickly drafted, with each faction cutting their palms and using the mixed blood as ink to sign their names on the document. Elijah didn't forget to hand the agreement to Klaus, asking him to sign it as well, to prevent his brother from causing any trouble. In reality, Klaus was indeed up to something. The moonlight rings he promised the werewolves would not only free them from the curse of transformation, but also allow them to retain their physical advantages in wolf form. Their bite can kill a vampire at any time, which is certainly a powerful threat to the vampire population. Meanwhile, with Josh's encouragement, Davina finally let go of her inner turmoil. Her magical talent far exceeded even Monique's, and the room full of revived flowers left her in awe. So Marcel once again sees Davina as his ally, and Thierry agrees to be his spearhead. Once again, New Orleans is in a state of flux. The witches were the first to make a move. Genevieve proposed holding a festival, a traditional celebration in times of peace, where she would officially introduce the new harvest witches at the ceremony. All the factions were only required to present ceremonial gifts. Elijah agreed to the proposal. The vampires were the first to object, but Diego had no leverage against Elijah and was forced to reluctantly accept. Francesca, representing the human faction, generously expressed her support as well. Klaus called Oliver, instructing him to accept Elijah's proposal and also to help him locate a particular werewolf. to facilitate Klaus's cooperation with the werewolves. Despite Haley's strong opposition, Oliver and Jackson agreed to Elijah's proposal. As the Harvest Witches practiced their magic, Monique suddenly screamed, sitting up abruptly, muttering something under her breath. When she finally calmed down, she revealed that she had just communicated with the ancestors, who believed that now was the perfect time to complete the harvest ritual. This meant that Genevieve had to die, but Genevieve flatly refused. She explained that her real goal in getting close to Klaus was to steal his mother's grimoire. She would decide her fate only after obtaining it. Oliver quickly located Carrie, a werewolf who shared the same bloodline as Klaus. Klaus questioned Carrie about the whereabouts of the stone from the Moonlight Ring, but Carrie claimed he didn't know. The three Harvest Witches gracefully arrived, surrounded by a crowd, marking the official start of the witches' traditional celebration. But in secret, Genevieve instructed a witch to steal the grimoire from the Originals family. Since Klaus had refused her request to borrow the book, the close relationship between them had already broken down, under the watchful eyes of the spectators. The first witch channeled her power to make the earth tremble, the second witch tilted her head back and summoned a gentle breeze, the third witch lit the fireworks with her bare hands. Fireworks blossomed under the dome, and the first phase of the celebration concluded perfectly. But the ill-intentioned witch snuck into the Original's mansion, and just as his hands touched the grimoire, Klaus suddenly appeared before him. The festival quickly moved into its second phase, where each faction was to present gifts to the Harvest Witches. But Monique, filled with jealousy as she watched the radiant and joyful Davina, felt that Davina didn't deserve the glory of being a Harvest Witch. And so, at Genevieve's behest, every member of the audience who tried to give Davina a gift was discouraged from doing so. The space around Davina's feet remained empty, her expression darkened, and finally, she couldn't bear it anymore and left the event. Josh appeared just in time and tried to take Davina away, but Klaus blocked their path and, without hesitation, took Josh captive. In front of all the guests, Klaus made a grand gesture to win over Davina and presented the gift he had prepared for her, but Davina refused to accept it. So Klaus changed his strategy, stating that although Josh had betrayed him, he decided to pardon Josh in front of everyone because of Davina. Josh was stunned by this unexpected favor, and Davina, too embarrassed to refuse Klaus's goodwill, reluctantly accepted. A new alliance was quietly formed, Klaus's way of sending a warning to Genevieve. When Davina opened the gift box, she found a page from a grimoire inside, containing a spell to create daylight rings. Such a generous gift left Davina and Josh both surprised and delighted. Camille, carrying a gift, approached Genevieve, humbly pleading for her help in saving Father Kieran. A beautiful emerald hairpiece caught Genevieve's eye, and she decided to help Camille. Suddenly, a group of drummers in suits marched into the festival, playing loudly. Everyone thought it was just an ordinary performance, but the drummers' actions shocked everyone present.
We have a message for all of you from Marcel Gerard.
The bewitched drummers all simultaneously drew their daggers and slashed their wrists, the sudden rush of blood immediately provoking the vampires present. Elijah hurriedly stepped forward to take control of the situation, demanding that the vampires restrain themselves. But as the lights suddenly went out, the scene quickly descended into chaos, becoming a living nightmare. Under the cover of darkness, the vampires went on a murderous rampage. Elijah frantically searched for Haley. By the time the lights came back on, the scene was a gruesome horror. Klaus had intended to protect Haley, but she was too busy looking for Elijah. They saw a blood-soaked message scrawled on the wall, "No peace ever." Marcel was reminiscing about today's victory when a roar rang out and Thierry was the first to be thrown out of the air. Elijah appeared in front of Marcel, seething with anger as he confronted him about his actions, but Marcel retaliated by threatening to reveal Klaus's secret schemes, prompting Elijah to plunge his hand into Marcel's chest. Thierry was quickly subdued by Elijah as well. He ripped Thierry's heart out with his bare hands, ending the life of Marcel's only and most loyal ally. Klaus, holding a gift, found Genevieve and remarked that she hadn't yet received his present. Klaus gentlemanly opened the box for Genevieve, revealing a pair of bloodied hands inside. This was his warning to Genevieve for trying to steal the grimoire, but Genevieve wasn't about to back down. She stated that she had originally planned to help Camille save her uncle, but now it seemed unnecessary, realizing that Klaus was indeed scheming behind his back. The Originals brothers erupted into a fierce argument. Klaus cruelly taunted Elijah about his feelings for Haley, but Elijah retorted that every time he suppressed his emotions for Haley, it was out of respect for Klaus. Now, however, he would no longer hold back and would pursue his own happiness. Thierry's death struck a nerve with the vampires. Diego, leading the vampires, secretly joined Marcel's faction. As the flames gradually consumed Thierry's body, the Anti-Originals Alliance, led by Marcel, once again formed a united front